This is for me, huh?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, welcome to our weekly update at Cape Breton Realty. My name is Everett Vass, and I'm here with Sherry McLeod, who's our managing broker here at Cape Breton Realty. We're doing a part 2 of a series that we started last week. This week is entitled the Overview of Scenarios Regarding Receiving, Negotiating, and Closing Offers. So last week, just a recap for those who might not have been there, we covered key steps in preparing a property for listing, staging, marketing, all the things that you do, in order to put the property on the market. And today's focus is going to be sort of the next stage, which is a lot more exciting. It's all about receiving and negotiating and closing deals. So that's going to be the focus of our talk today. And thank you for coming. I know that you were just on the road. It was very snowy coming back from Sydney, so thank you for making it back. So I think what the most important thing here is that understanding the offer process can help our sellers maximize, their return and avoid any pitfalls. That's really what it's all about, and we're certainly here to help. We do have some interesting market updates, though, because this week the Bank of Canada once again has reduced the key interest rate by another
0.25
basis points, the 6th straight in a row. So we're down to 3%, for that key interest rate. So my first question for you, I guess, is sort of what do you think this change or the reduction will have, and what impact will that have on our market here in Cape Breton?
Well, obviously it makes things more affordable. It helps people to get into mortgages. Their borrowing power is a little bit higher, right?
Yeah.
As long as they continue to have jobs, I guess. Obviously, it's not a good sign when you look at the economy. As the rates are coming down all the time, the economy is not as good. However, for those that are working and keep maintaining their jobs and stuff, then, but if you're in a job market that fluctuates, then that's not a good sign. But for the rest of the people that have, teachers and nurses and, government employees and those kind of people, then they're going to be able to buy homes, right?
So, on the positive side, we're looking at potentially an increase in competition for listings.
Yes.
On the other side, we just heard also, it was confirmed just on the news that Mr. Trump will be imposing, the tariffs. So 25%. So this is going to give us a little relief before the sort of the inflation that might kick in due to the tariffs happen. So it may be short-lived, and the speculation, most economists are saying that the Bank of Canada will probably raise rates after what's happening now. So it might be a good time to get into the market if you're able to, at the lowest rates.
Yeah, I don't know if everybody else watched what the Bank of Canada guy said, but he was pretty wishy-washy as to, whether the next time around it's going to be an increase or a decrease, because it depends on the market and what happens and stuff. It always depends on the market and what happens.
But he was literally throwing his hands in the air saying, I just can't tell. There's just no way to know. And if he doesn't know, then, how's that going to...
That's a good sign that, we better do what we can.
Thank you.
As far as getting a mortgage rate locked in. Now's the time to go to the bank and get your mortgage rate, lock it in, right? And then you have 30, 60, and 90 days to go and find a home. It's a perfect time to do that.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's one of the things we're going to touch on too, is getting a pre-approval and so forth that could help in the buying process. So the first event that I'd like to cover in the process would be receiving an offer. So
it's always nice.
It's always nice. So understanding what is in an offer is also important. So maybe you could run through some of the key elements to consider when it comes to receiving an offer. What are the types of things that we should be looking for?
Well, always always people are very interested in the price, right? How much are they going to offer? Are they offering full price? Is there, is there conditions or contingencies, right? And generally, standard conditions are financing, even if they're pre-approved, they'll have a financing clause, and inspection, insurance. Those are standard things that pretty much every offer will have in it in our marketplace, right? The other thing to think about is the closing date, of course, because people often, they have to be out by a certain time or in to another place within a certain time, or they have another house that they're buying, or that their apartment is up at the end of the month, or people have deadlines for those things. So closing dates can be important. One of the things with the closing date, if you're very concerned about your closing date because you're financing from one house and going from one house to another, I just want to throw in that, instead of stressing over a closing date sometime, it's onerous, and it makes life a whole lot easier.
So, I mean, in the best case scenario, when we have, say, an offer and a closing, the fastest that those two normally happen would be probably a month, right? So like you have the offer, and then a month later is the closing. But during that time also has to be the conditions, they have to be met and waived. So that's typically at least a week, if not 2 weeks into that cycle. And then you have the lawyer review as well, which is another sort of milestone, another deadline that has to happen in that time frame.
Yeah, there's other conditions that are often in there. Your financing obviously has to get approved. Often there's an appraisal to be done. There's often water in there of the property. Closing date could be 30 days, but it could also be 6 months or 9 months, so all those things are to be considered based on the situations, right?
So I think, sort of the scenarios that we see, I mean, typically can be categorized into two, one of them being a strong, where you have like a competitive price with minimum conditions, and then a strong deposit and a quick close. That's ideal. Anything less than that could be considered, medium or weak in terms of the conditions, in terms of the closing, in terms of the deposit. If there's really, the earnest money that's being put up is not enough, for the type of property that we're talking about. It's like,
well, one thing that I always think about when I see these offers coming in with $1,000 or $500 for a deposit or earnest money, I think, if they don't have enough to put their 5% down, they're never going to get a mortgage, right? They don't need to put they don't need to put that money down the day they make the offer. It can be a week later. But if they don't have 5%, where are they going to get the money for that? What's the likelihood that they're going to be able to get the financing in place, right? Not very good if they can't come up with a deposit in a week, right?
And that definitely creates an appearance, at least, of some risk. And that's what people don't want to see when we're talking about a transaction like this.
Buyers think, well, I don't want to put money there, I might lose it. But that's not true. The conditions are there to protect that. And if they don't put their best foot forward, then, it affects what the counter offer or the results of their offer. It affects that dramatically, right? If you have $1,000 deposit on a $500,000 house, they're going to either say, well, we might take this offer if you'll increase your deposit to $10,000, or they, but they're not going to take it very serious. And if there's more than one offer, they're going to go for the fellow that put $50,000 down because they know that he has the money going in to get that, right?
The more serious buyer, So you have to evaluate on that basis. It's not just price, but it's also, the closing and any kind of what else? Any kind of contingencies that would be put in if there's any demands that are being made that are unreasonable. You have to sort of evaluate on that basis. Yeah.
And the conditions that do go in there could be as personalized as can be. It can be conditional upon getting confirmation that you got the new job over at, you're moving here from Alberta or whatever, and you applied for a job at the pulp and paper mill, so if you don't get the job, you don't need the house, right? Things like that. So you can personalize those things. So the contingencies in there, they can, obviously the fellow that's looking to move here for work is very serious about buying a house. They look at that contingency as, well, he really needs a house. He's not just jerking me around here, and he should know by day after tomorrow. So let's give him that time, But if they have another offer that's very similar, they're going to probably go with the other one, right? So.
And sometimes it's something that appeals to the buyer that the seller was not intending on parting with. For example, a piano, which was a family heirloom, but the buyer wants the piano, includes that in the condition, and that becomes an issue.
I don't recommend that you fight over chattels. Deal with the chattels later if it turns into that kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen lots of people lose deals over a bedspread or curtains or a fridge that, it's just silly.
Yeah.
Could have went out and bought another one.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. Came from Walmart, for crying out loud, that sofa, or, whatever. It's just silly.
So we talked about, how serious the seller is, also, the buyer, how serious the buyer is, and then also the reputation. If the buyer has had a history of sort of, pulling out of deals or making these crazy claims, and that has led to some issues in the past. So you look at also the history there too.
Yeah, and it's a small world. We're in a very small populated area, and so people find things out pretty quickly. And in our real estate market, for sure, right? Other realtors know things that go on. Oh, this fellow made an offer on another property I had, and he couldn't get his financing then. Do you think he can get his financing now?
Yeah, what's changed? Sort of
and does he have confirmation? Do you have confirmation? And the other realtor says, oh yes, I have confirmation. All is good. But then you go to present this to your client, and you say, you've got two of these. This one looks a little bit better, but this guy did walk away before, right? Because we knew he had a financial issue or whatever. Hopefully he's got that resolved, and the realtor says so, but I want to make you aware, right? Those kind of things in a small market make a big difference.
Yeah, so there's many factors. The common sort of negotiating scenarios that we find, again, we want to maximize the return and ensure the deal works for the seller, if the seller is our client, obviously. And there can be situations where it's a single offer, or you have multiple offers.
That's when we get into the fun part.
Yeah, that's the bidding war starts. Yeah. So what can you tell us about those scenarios?
Well, again, the first thing that people look at is usually price, but that's not always the smartest thing to look at. If it's a clean offer and it has no conditions, it doesn't need a financing clause and doesn't need an inspection clause, and it's $5,000 in the difference, take the clean offer that's sure to happen, right? And counter the second offer and put it in second place, right? Those are options that are available, right? So.
Yeah, and the other tactic that we've seen is having an offer deadline. Say, when you put the listing out, you say, we will be accepting offers until this date, at which point they will be reviewed, and the buyer, the buyer will be part of will be evaluated on the basis of multiple offers. And so, what has been your experience in that scenario?
Well, we have very little of that now. We did have a fair amount of it during COVID, right? And sellers, of course, get pretty plucky when that's the case, you have multiple offers. But, you know, you wanna still keep in mind, don't just dwell on the price. You want a firm deal, not a deal that's gonna fall, right? And very often, when they have multiple offers, people get caught up with, you know, the adrenaline, kind of like going to an auction and bidding on things you don't want. You just can't keep that paddle down, right? So, and people get buyer remorse sometimes, you know, before they get to the finish line. So, you know, you want to keep that in mind and try and keep your head about you and your wits about you. But it's nice to have competing offers because it does generally mean you get a better price.
Right, and understanding the buyer's motivation as well, as you say, saying somebody who's moving for a job who absolutely has to find a house is not the same as somebody who's like thinking about it or would like to eventually, you know, sort of thing. So,
Or I'd like to buy everything in that neighborhood, but you know, I don't want to pay much for it. You know, that you get different reasons for buying, right?
Yeah. So you got to be sort of more strategic, looking at it from a higher perspective and a higher level. The other thing is that we find is that, you know, avoid sort of over negotiating or coming off as being, you know, too pushy or too demanding, too aggressive, you know, because that really turns people off as well.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line there.
I mean, I had an offer today that happened exactly. You know, the seller came back with, you know, well, I'll accept that price, but I want a great big non-refundable deposit, and I want it to happen in this much time, and they can't have those conditions, and you know, well, the buyer said, you know, too bad, would have been nice. We'll look for something else, you know, so you can overplay your hand. And very often, you know, in our market, you can't overplay your hand because it's a pretty balanced market. I mean, you know, we don't have a market like Toronto or Vancouver or, you know, Calgary. We're in rural Cape Breton, right? So even in Sydney, where the market is much busier than it is here, or has been since the last number of years, the multiple offers have really slowed, right? He's still selling, but not in the same time frame, and so you can't overplay your hand and be too demanding, right?
And that's also the role of the agent as well, to provide that sort of you know, advice or at least some objective opinion, you know, on the situation. So because sometimes that, you know, helps and understand, you know, based on our experience and so forth, and how things have been worked out in the past, and sort of what's typical in terms of, you know, best practices. That can also help.
That's very important, actually, because, you know, people generally cannot make, you know, very good decisions on their own things without some guidance, right?
So, I mean, obviously the primary role of the agent is to handle a lot of the administration of the offers, you know, the acceptance of the offers, making sure that the conditions are met, the closing process proceeds, and so forth.
And all the conditions are on paper, right? None of this side deals and not putting it in the contract, because then that just leads to upset people at the end, right? Oh, I want to buy the sofa for $200, that's a good deal, and you get there and the sofa's gone, right? Oh, I didn't pay my $200. Well, you know, I thought I could pay the $200 this afternoon, right? But
unless it's written down, it really does create a lot of confusion when people start saying, well, I want this and I want that, and they don't write it down, and there's no implicit agreement.
Come moving day, the movers pick everything up and take it, right? So, you know, it's enough to, you know, people, they're busy, they're cranky, they're moving, you know, it's a stressful time for them, and everything that's on paper gets done.
Yeah. To safeguard that, then, you know, when you are making an offer, or when you are accepting an offer, make sure that all of the things that the buyer wants to be included are listed on the offer. That way, you know, there's no misunderstanding.
Yeah, exactly, right? So.
Some of the challenges that we see, I mean, I think, just in terms of what's, sort of most typical or what most often occurs, number one probably is the buyer's financing falling through.
Well, and that shouldn't even be an issue, because before they even go shopping, if they have a realtor, the realtor should make sure they're qualified before they take them out to look at houses, right? That's part of our job. That's part of our job description,
Yeah.
So, number one, they should be qualified. And if the realtor is not capable of getting them qualified, they need to call a mortgage broker or a banker in and get some help with that and get it done, right? Then they know the price range and there's no disappointments.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice. Inspection issues. Some things come up in an inspection.
Always, always. If you're gonna have an inspection, the inspector's gotta find something, or he just doesn't feel like he did his job. And some of them can get pretty anal. So, the doorstep needs to be painted, because they scraped the paint off when they were shoveling last week, it's normal. If you're living in a house and it's not brand new, then you do, even a brand new one, when you do an inspection, there's always things, but you have to understand that nobody said that you were buying a brand new house, or nobody said that it was gonna be perfect. The inspection tells you what is there, and if you're prepared to take it the way it is, great, and if you're not, then we can go back and try to negotiate something. But once you start negotiating on that inspection, your sellers don't have to do a thing.
Right.
I think people think that, well, the inspector gave me a list of 17 things. The light bulbs were out in that room, and, they're all little things. The air exchanger had to be cleaned because, the vents were dirty, or those are minor things that are in every inspection. The doorbell was a double tap on the electrical panel. That's minor. It's not relevant, really. I can fix those things. You don't lose a deal over those things, right? But sometimes you have a buyer that's determined that the seller has to do all of those things, and the realtor should be reining them in a little bit and explaining the difference, right?
Good advice. What about when it happens that there's a gap between the appraisal and what the purchase price of the house? What happens then? Because that could be a source of issues as well.
Yeah, it's often a source of issues in multiple offers, because the appraiser might come back and say, okay, the house is worth $500 and they're paying $510. So we're going to give you have a down payment based on $510. But we're only giving you the money up to $500. So there's an extra 10 grand there you have to come up with.
Cash, basically,
Yeah.
Or else, right.
So, most people, when they're in that price range, don't get me wrong, they can come up with the extra 10 or whatever they need, right? But sometimes they're on tight budgets and they can't, and that'll ruin the deal.
So, and speaking of ruining the deal, I mean, one of the causes that I've seen, at least, and not personally, but I've seen out there, but missing deadlines. For example, the Form 408, the waiver. It used to be that sort of no news was good news. If you didn't hear anything, then the deal was going through. Now you have to, explicitly send in a form that says, yes, these conditions have been all met, and we waive, any conditions that were on the original agreement of purchase. So that's a big one, having those deadlines.
If you don't sign your 408 on time, your deal is dead.
Yeah, it just basically expired and null.
If people that have been buying and selling in Nova Scotia for the last 30 years are quite shocked at that, because they think no news is good news, and then they find out that they've lost their deal, right? And it gets better than that. They not only lost their deal, but if there's a backup offer in place, the backup offer will fall right into place, and they're really toast, right?
They're hosed.
And they thought they spent all this money to do their inspections and get everything in order, they put their money in order, and they're ready to roll,
Yeah.
and they're very disappointed. So, you know, everybody has to be on top of those dates.
Yes, yes. So the moral to the story, of course, is good communication is key. And, I think that you also have to be, to a certain degree, flexible and yet firm. So we need to understand, what are the consequences, of certain, things happening, and how do we respond? So in communicating how we do that, it's important that the agent and the seller are in contact so that we can work those things out and make sure that there are no sort of pitfalls that we fall into.
And as the seller's agent, you might send the buyer's agent a little reminder, the 408 is due today, you see that coming forward, or, where are we at with things?
Yeah,
It's just a little nudge, wink, wink. Get your bum in order, let's get this going. So.
Or one that we will typically have on our calendars is also a date for the lawyer review, so that we're in contact with the lawyer and say, this lawyer review date is coming up. Is everything okay? Have you checked the title? Is everything fine? Can we proceed? At that point, so that's important to know. Yeah. Okay.
So that is our job, to keep everybody basically on the level and where they should be with things, right?
Yeah.
So I laugh and make fun of myself because I give people honey-do lists, you know. I do all the time, right? I'll send my clients their little honey-do list on their texts, right? And then they can go back to it, and then and 3 days later I'm sending it back to them. This is done and this is done.
Right.
We just need this and this and this.
Still remaining, yeah.
And it's due by noon.
Yeah.
So
some of the final steps in closing before it's all over and done with, the review of the closing documents. So the deed has to be checked, the settlement statement, any disclosures, any easements or anything have to be checked on. So those are all things that are usually done by the lawyer and the title work that's done by the lawyer.
One of the things that we should remember to mention here is that the lawyer would like to have a copy of your insurance, confirmation that you have insurance. Especially if you're getting a mortgage, because that's one of the conditions of your mortgage, right? So the lawyer's going to be asking, the insurance company to send them confirmation, and that often happens behind the scenes, right? But that's a very important fact, because on closing day, you need that, right? Before you get the draw for the money from the bank. So make sure you get your insurance in place, even though you waived your insurance clause a week or two ago. You didn't go to the insurance office and sign the paperwork and do what you need to do. So you need to do that, and that's a last minute thing. Right?
And also a last minute thing would be the final walkthrough. So you have to do an inspection basically to make sure that everything that was in the agreement is included and it's in the right condition and so forth.
And it's not. You used the word inspection. I'm going to say, wait, don't use that word.
It's a walkthrough.
Yeah, it's a walkthrough. An inspection takes 3 or 4 hours. A final walkthrough is a 10-minute deal, right? You walk through and say, yeah, the fridge is here, the stove is here, the curtains are still here. That's good. What is there? What else was in this contract? Is the water, on? Does everything work, right? But is the oil tank full, right? But it's not oh gee, let's get up on the roof and make sure everything is, it's not that,
No. And that's a good reminder just about some of the closing costs, because in addition to the agent commission, there's the deed transfer tax oftentimes, and any potential repair costs, the oil, the taxes, for the portion of the year. Also, I've had a situation where the buyer wants to take over the utilities. So we have to do the transfer of the the electric account, the bill, the water, the cable. Sometimes they want to do the internet. all those things have to be sort of done beforehand to make sure that the services don't get cut off on the day of, you know,
That's right.
when the service officially ends.
I have a letter that I put together some time ago indicating, you know, if you want to get power in this area, this is the number you call, and this is the website, and to get Starlink, here's where you go. To get Seaside, here's where you go. To get Bell, you know, to give the client the directions.
Yeah.
And you know, it's if you call Nova Scotia Power to flip the power over into your name, then you know the previous owner's name you will want and the address, and sometimes you'll give them the account number if you can get it from the previous owner, right?
Yeah.
And it just makes makes it a whole lot easier for them. And when you're hooking up power, the person that's leaving has to have called to disconnect the power. So you need a little coordinating there, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of those things that if you put it all on paper and pass it to them, or email it to them and they have it, they can look it up, you know, and say, it keeps everybody, you know, oh yeah, I didn't forget that. Because people will arrive on Friday afternoon and their closing happens and then the power goes off. Oh, I didn't know they'd turn it off that quickly. Yep, they do, right?
So yes, that is definitely part of our job to make sure that things happen and transition smoothly. I mean, that's one of one of the greatest values of having an agent. So we want to make it smooth, and that also to make sure that the funds are transferred before we give the keys over. That's also a very important part of what we do.
Yeah, and one of the things that people often think that when they go and do their final walkthrough and they're done, okay, can I have the keys? Nope, sorry. You know, you have to call the lawyer and tell the lawyer that everything is fine.
Yeah.
And then your lawyer needs to exchange the money and deed. We're not done, right? So people think, well, I'll just wait around then if we can wait a few minutes. And go, no, it doesn't happen that way.
It's usually at best 3 hours or so. At most maybe 8 hours, or sort of thing. Yeah.
It's usually first thing in the morning that you do your final walkthrough.
Yes.
Even if everything was done at the lawyer's office and that's all they needed, you do your final walkthrough at 8 a.m. The bank doesn't open till 10.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't. There's no transfer of funds.
Yeah.
The deed is probably being couriered, and God knows what time of the day that'll arrive, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it doesn't work then.
So there's a few hours at least, yeah. So, in terms of the recommendations that you would have, I mean, obviously being on top of the situation, staying organizing, but also preparing for any kind of adjustments that would need to be made. You have to be flexible, and you can't sort of like freak out at the last minute. You've got to keep your wits about you, basically. Is there anything else that you can think of that was sort of in parting that we can instill in terms of wisdom?
Well, I think on closing day, it's always a good idea to not be stressed. To do what you can to prevent the stress. Try to prepare things as best you can ahead of time. But when sometimes people are still moving out at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they spent the night there the night before, and they're stressed, and the buyers are stressed, and they want to get moving in, and so try to coordinate that. The people, when you're moving out, that you're moving out a day or two early, right? Bridge
it
finance,
makes the walkthrough easier as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. Let's not, have this so stressful, right? And it's just so much easier. And it takes sometimes days to move, right? And that thing's left, garbage is still in the shed, or, don't stress about it. The worst scenario is it costs, an extra $75 to someone to come to take the garbage to the dump. Right? Well, who's going to pay for that? It's your garbage, honey, but the buyer will have it done, and will take the $75 off the price. Who cares, right? If you're dealing with that kind of money, right? It's like we can get that done. And I can honestly say I paid for lots of junk runs, because the last minute everybody's stressed and hyper and ready to, that's it, I'm not gonna sell, well, let's forget about that, you're gonna sell, let's move on. Your buyer, well, he's upset because the garbage is there. Listen, the garbage will be gone within an hour, I swear, I'll have somebody in, right? And it might not be $75, it's $150 because you have to get it out of there quick, right?
Exactly,
so, but you do what you gotta do to get these things to come together sometimes.
Sure,
But everybody is cranky at the last because they're stressed, right? So try to, do things ahead of time. That's my biggest advice. Right?
So just some final thoughts that we'd like to leave you with is selling a home is a complex process. I think, with the right strategy and the right preparation and some expert guidance, as we've heard about today, we can help you navigate, the offers and the closing successfully. So we're, the key takeaways are evaluate offers, beyond just the price. Look at the bigger context. Be strategic in your negotiations, and then work closely with your agent. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Communication with your agent is so important, And sometimes, I know I have no problem communicating. I have, the gift to gab. But sometimes I feel like, they're probably sick and tired of hearing from me now. What am I calling for? What am I going to make them do now? But it's really important because at the end, it makes your life so much easier. And if you don't do these things in the timely fashion, it makes things very stressful. Right? So.
Good.
Yeah. And we can't do everything for them. We can't call the Nova Scotia Power Company.
Right.
Set those things up. We can't call the movers. We can't, can't meet with their lawyer. They need to do it, right? So those things are, I think the most important thing. Communication between the lawyer and the realtor and the home owner.
And Cape Breton Realty is here to help every step of that along the way.
And for us it's very nonchalant because we do it every day and we don't get, we're level-headed and not stressed about things that go there's always something that can go wrong, right?
Sideways,
It's all right, because, we can fix it. It's not life-threatening stuff, right? We're not doctors. Chill out tonight. Celebrate, have a good meal, if you're the buyer's realtor, then you maybe order them pizza and beer so that they have something moving in, and the seller a bottle of bubbly to celebrate or whatever,
So great. Well, if you have any comments, you can leave them on the posting for this. And if you have any questions, you can reach us at Sherry, SHERRY, at CapeBretonRealty.com or Everett, EVERETT, at CapeBretonRealty.com. We'd love to hear your comments. We'd love to have any questions that you might have if we can help you.
Yeah. That's great. All right. I guess he makes us up a little list here of what we're going to talk about, and he really does follow it. I really have to say he's pretty good at that. But at the bottom it's saying that is there community activities going on this week?
Yeah, I did want to mention that Pastor Keith Wiseman and I, Pastor Keith is the United Church here in St. Peter's. We're going to be performing at a fundraiser that's taking place at the St. Louis Church in Lewisdale, Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4. That's Sunday, February 2nd, from 2 to 4. We're going to be there. And also, mark your calendars, programming note that the Cape Breton Chorale, which I sing with, and will be a featured soloist at our spring concert, where we're going to be performing Mozart's Requiem, as well as some other pieces by Mendelssohn and Brahms, some beautiful music. That will be Sunday, April 13th at 3 p.m. At the St. Andrew's Church in Sydney Mines. So mark your calendars for that. We'd love to see you. And also, you know, I know that you see that we have water in front of us. We've decided to go dry February. We're starting early, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think we have to start early because I'm going to be in Vegas the last week of February,
Oh.
and I can't do that. That can't be dry.
Yeah. Okay. So you're going to get 1 week in advance so that you can have 1 week at the tail end of February.
I'm sorry,
sounds.
but
We'll have to
you know.
split that. Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, we'll come up with some ideas of what we can do for next week. Maybe you know, looking at the negotiation from the buyer's perspective, you know,
Yes.
as it is from the seller's perspective. So we've got some ideas. But if you have any ideas, please let us know. Anything that you want to find out more about, we'd be happy to
I'm happy to help.
provide. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Very
Very
good.
good.
Well, we'll still
Well, we're still going
drink
to
a toast to the weekend.
but it's water, huh?
It's water. Yeah. Stancha.
I don't know. I don't know if I can do that.
Cheers. Sure you can. Mm.
Gee, it's just not the same. Yeah.
Oh well, we'll get
Just
through
not
it.
the same.
We'll get through it.
All right.
Thank you. Have
Thank
a good
you.
weekend.
Have a good weekend.